A woman fears her husband after he learns of her affair. But when she is found dead, is he to blame? This is the Amy Mullis story. Hi, Meghan.
Good morning.
Hello. I love how I've been going back to do some of our reconsidered episodes, and the hello, Meghan, it's exactly the same. It's so interesting how consistent one's voice could be over the years.
Sure, that's what I would say. Consistent's the word.
Yes, right?
Going back and doing reconsidered is so interesting. It's so fun. It's fun, but it's also, like, uh-oh.
Yeah, it's making me hate myself a little, but that's okay.
No, not at all. You are who you are.
I am who I am, yes. For today, I want to give a big shout out to Jason for suggesting this case. And I'm actually surprised that I hadn't heard of it before. Have you heard the name Amy Mullis? Maybe Todd Mullis?
That's funny when you said Todd. No, it sounds familiar. We'll see.
Okay, so this is my favorite type of case to cover, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on it. So let's just go ahead and dive in and meet Amy.
Okay, I'm curious why it's your favorite case, but we'll dive in and then I'll find out. Okay,
Yes,
go ahead.
yes,
I'll try to contain it.
Okay. Amy Lynn Fuller was born on January 23rd, 1979 in Ames, Iowa. Amy went to college for nursing, and after graduating, she got a job as an RN with St. Luke's Hospital in Cedar Rapids. After just a few years there, she transferred to the ER at the Regional Medical Center in Manchester. And this is where she was working in 2003 when she met a man named Todd Mullis. Now, Todd was a local farmer who operated 3 farms. He was a very busy guy, and he was very successful in his farming. These two ran into each other at a county fair, which is just so cute. Like, to think they live in Iowa, they met at a county fair. Meghan, have you ever been to a county fair?
Yeah, of course. Haven't you?
Maybe. I don't know. Something about a county fair in Iowa just feels different than it would like in New Jersey. I don't know, because I feel like it's like more in the country,
No, I'm sure it's a different feel than New Jersey's county fairs. But yeah, I've definitely been to some as a kid.
Okay. Well, these two hit it off, and they got married on September 11th, 2004. Soon after, they would welcome 3 children, and Amy chose to leave her nursing job to partner in Todd's farming operation.
Oh.
And this would allow her to stay home with her children and also help out. And Amy really enjoyed her time working on the farm. She also loved hunting, fishing, gardening, and camping with her family.
Wow.
She was also an avid Iowa Hawkeyes fan. This woman did a lot. She also spent her free time designing and making T-shirts. So I wonder if she used, like that thing called the Cricut? Have you ever heard of that? I've never used it, but it's like something people use to make things like T-shirts. Anyway, so she just loved being a mother to her 3 kids. But while Amy seemed happy to outsiders, she was not very satisfied with her marriage. And around 2013, she went on to have an affair with somebody that she met through work. This was somebody she met at the hospital job at this point.
Okay, even though she wasn't working there anymore, but she had known him from before. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure how, but Todd found out. But despite the infidelity, the couple went to counseling in an effort to reconcile.
Mm-hmm.
And according to the family, Todd was incredibly invested in making the marriage work. Mostly, though, not because of his love for Amy, but because he and Amy were shareholders in his farm. In fact, he told Amy's stepmother that he wouldn't divorce her, saying, quote, "I'm not going to lose my farm and everything that I have worked for." Unfortunately, however, couples counseling would not stop Amy from having a second affair in 2018. And this time it was with one of the farm's overseers, Jerry Frasher. Todd became suspicious of these two, though. He had a feeling that something was going on. And the reason why he first started thinking of this is because he saw a phone bill and he noted that there was a significant amount of contact between the two of them.
Okay.
So Todd first confronted Jerry, and though Jerry adamantly denied the affair, Todd's suspicions were so deep that he called Jerry's wife about it. And he also told his family and friends. And though Jerry was denying it and Amy had not told Todd anything about it, Amy admitted the affair to a few of her closest friends. But now, why was Amy cheating a second time? If she didn't want to be with Todd anymore, why wouldn't she just ask for a divorce?
Well, there's a lot of reasons why people don't ask for a divorce, so I won't speculate until you give me more information.
Well, I'll tell you why. Amy told a friend that Todd did not want to divorce because he said he would lose everything and because he felt that it was socially unacceptable. Amy also claimed that she was scared of Todd and that if he found out about wanting a divorce or an affair, that he would kill her.
Had he threatened her?
Well, I'm not sure if he threatened her, but she did go as far to tell one of her friends where to look for her body if she went missing.
Oh my gosh.
And this was not said in jest. She clearly was afraid and felt that Todd would get physical with her.
Okay.
And not long after this, she told her friend that she was, quote, to the point where she felt like she was strong enough to leave on her own. And she said it wasn't so much about that she would leave for Jerry. She wanted to just leave on her own. She just didn't want to be with Todd anymore, that she wasn't necessarily leaving to be with someone else.
Yeah.
And Amy also told this friend that she was quietly looking for jobs and somewhere else to live. She also started storing some furniture at her brother's home. So there was pretty clear plans here that Amy was ready to leave the marriage.
All right.
However, Amy would never get that chance to start over. On November 6, 2018, Amy had a minor outpatient medical procedure, and this would require her to take a few days of rest and do only light work around the house and around the farm. On the morning of November 10th, a friend had texted Amy to see how she was doing. Amy's response was, quote, "Thanks, okay. Things are still very tense around here. Just not sure of anything anymore." That same morning, she also emailed Jerry, the man she was having an affair with, and this was around 10 a.m. And she said, "Do you know what I'm doing today? ? Cleaning fucking light fixtures in the barn. WTF." This was clearly in reference to some of the work she was doing with Todd. And actually, that particular day, she was doing work with Todd and Tristan, who was their 12-year-old son at the time. And Tristan also helped out on the farm pretty often.
Okay.
I want to point out that what happens next is only from the perspective of Todd and Tristan. So we can never know exactly what happened, but this will be based on what they claim.
Right.
They say that Amy had been standing on a bucket to clean a light fixture, and because of her recent procedure, she had seemed a bit unsteady. So they told her, "Why don't you get down and rest a little," and Todd took over the cleaning. While Todd continued cleaning the light fixture, Amy went to a nearby shed to retrieve something. I heard it being called a shed or a barn. I guess they're one and the same, but in case I say both, I just wanted to point that out. Meanwhile, Todd and Tristan continued to work for another hour or so. At some point, Tristan left to get some water from a nearby office. The reason I'm saying at some point is because the timeline is unclear here.
Mm-hmm.
A little while later, again vague timeline, Todd asked Tristan to go retrieve a pet carrier from the shed. Now, this seems to have been somewhere around an hour, give or take. Tristan says this is when and where he found his mother on her hands and knees, face down, with a corn rake sticking out of her back.
Oh my gosh. I did not see that coming. I did not see that coming. Okay.
So for those of you who don't know, a corn rake is a sharp, heavy-duty farming tool that's used to, as it sounds like, to scoop corn. It kind of looks like a pitchfork in a way, or like a rake.
Yeah.
So Tristan sees this and he starts yelling for his father, and his father came rushing over. They both said that Amy was unresponsive, she didn't appear to have a pulse, and she was not breathing. Todd told Tristan to go get the truck, and while he was gone, Todd later admitted that he did not render aid or call 911 while he waited for Tristan. I do want to point out it was probably likely, a minute, if that. The car wasn't parked far away and everyone's kind of running, so maybe he was just in shock.
All right.
When Tristan brought the truck over, he says that he watched his father pull the corn rake out of his mother's back before Todd loaded her onto Tristan's lap in the driver's seat of the truck.
Oh my gosh. Brutal.
So they took off for the hospital. Now, this was a very rural area, so the nearest hospital was, from what I understand, maybe 15 minutes away. So they decided to just get in the car and go. Now, some people have issue with this. I don't know the area. I don't know what he was thinking, so I can't really judge personally.
I certainly wouldn't judge that.
While driving, Todd called 911, and the time was now 12:01 p.m. I'm going to go ahead and play the 911 call so that we can then talk about it afterwards, okay?
All right.
Delaware County 911, what's the address of your emergency? Hello?
I'm on the road. I'm out of breath.
Okay. What's going on, sir?
My wife, she's not responsive. I don't know if she's sick. I don't know. She was halfway out the door. I sent my son over to check on her. He yelled at me, and she looks gone.
Okay. We'll get an ambulance for in just a second.
I'm headed there. I grabbed her and threw her in the truck when my son pulled me.
Okay, you're headed to the hospital, and she's in your vehicle?
Yes, and there's no pulse.
There's no pulse. Can you pull over?
I can.
Okay, how about you pull over?
Can I do anything? There's nothing.
Okay. What is your name, sir?
Todd Mullis. You feel anything? Amy.
Okay, sir. What happened that she's not conscious or breathing?
She fell on a fork. I had to put a fork on her. It was an old fork sitting in somewhere, and then she was halfway out of the barn. Like, she was calling to get out, and then Tristan yelled, and I ran over there, and she's laying there. She is not responding.
Okay.
Come on.
Sir, do you feel comfortable doing CPR?
I can try. I'll try anything.
Is she flat on the... Are you able to get her flat across maybe the seat?
Yeah, 1, 2. 1, 2.
Go on.
Come on, respond. She's cold. Come on. Come on. Come on.
Okay, so that was the 911 call. Obviously, it wasn't the whole thing, but that was the gist of it. As you can imagine, people have scrutinized that call. I'm curious. Right. I'll tell you my thoughts, but I'm curious what your thoughts are initially.
He sounds panicked to me. Initially, he sounds scared. He sounds frazzled and scared to me.
And other people will say that he sounds like he's faking it, breathing into the phone, giving a lot of details, trying to set a narrative about what happened. It reminds me of Ryan Widmer case. We did Ryan Widmer. Right? With the breathing.
I had the same thought about Ryan, if you recall. Other people thought that, and I thought he sounded scared and panicked. So.
Yeah. And there's no way to know. We know that people's affect and the way people come off doesn't indicate guilt or innocence.
Not at all, but what did you think? You said you would give me your thought.
It's a little hard because I've already researched the case. So I'm looking at it through the eyes. I'm looking at it a little differently than you're looking at it.
Right.
Because I already have preconceived notions about what I think happened here. But yeah, he does give a lot of details. He's like telling the story of what happens. It's almost like he's like setting the stage for the story in a way. But
I'm an over detailer too, though, especially when I panic and like I get frazzled. So I'd be all over the place. I don't know. I found her. I would give, like verbal. So I guess because I can relate to it, it doesn't strike me as that odd.
Yeah. The breathing into the phone, didn't that remind you of Ryan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, we covered Sarah Widmer, Ryan Widmer's case on Direct Appeal Season 2. And the 911 call was a huge part of that case.
Right.
Okay, so as you heard, the operator told Todd to pull over and perform CPR. Mm-hmm. And so not long after that, an officer arrived on the scene, and the officer would take over CPR until the ambulance arrived. After Amy was loaded in the ambulance, Todd followed it to the hospital. Unfortunately, Amy was pronounced dead on arrival. Mm-hmm. A medical examiner completed an initial examination of her remains and discovered 6 puncture wounds on her back, along with injuries to Amy's chin, cheekbone, knees, and the knuckles of each hand. The injury to Amy's chin had both crush and scraping components to it, and there was no debris found in the wound.
Would this be from the fall forward? But there's no debris in the wound.
Well, while these injuries may have coincided with a hard fall, the medical examiner had asked to see the corn rake since Todd had reported that that's what she had fallen on. Mm-hmm. But upon seeing the rake, suspicions were raised about Todd's story because the rake in question had 4 prongs, but Amy had 6 puncture wounds. Now the question becomes, how could something with only 4 prongs create 6 punctures? This is when suspicion turns to Todd.
Also, I guess the theory then, and I'll sure you'll talk about it, is that she had to, if she was on her hands and knees, the theory is that she fell backwards and then crawled over?
Potentially. We'll talk about alternate theories.
Okay, I'm just trying to get an idea of how she would have fallen onto it and then wound up on the other side.
Yes.
Okay.
Because of the suspicion, the state forensic pathologist was summoned to go ahead and perform a full autopsy on Amy's remains. And the autopsy determined that the damage to Amy's left hand could have been defensive wounds, which could be consistent with a struggle. It was also, again, noted that she had some blunt force trauma to her chin, her cheek, and her ear. Mm. When examining the puncture wounds to Amy's back, the pathologist discovered 2 different wound paths. Now, this would suggest that she was impaled with the corn rake at least 2 and possibly 3 times.
Well, that's a huge finding.
In addition, the pathologist found that the corn rake penetrated through Amy's back deep enough to rupture her breast implant and exit her front side, as well as puncture her lung and her liver.
Oh, God, that's terrible.
And because of this, the pathologist officially classified Amy's manner of death as a homicide.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this begs the question, who was responsible?
I mean, does it beg the question, is there anyone else home besides Todd and their son?
Well, remember, Amy was having an affair, so they did want to look into Jerry.
Oh, and they had people on the grounds too, like Jerry and others, I guess, if they were running a farm. So, okay.
However, they were cleared by the police very early on. But we know from so many other cases that the most viable suspect in this type of case is usually the spouse. So after clearing Jerry, all eyes were on Todd. And while Todd denied harming his wife, police were suspicious. They said he was extremely emotionless during the interrogation. Again, we don't judge affect. I don't put much stock in this, but there's some other evidence that I do put stock in.
Exactly.
Okay, and what did Tristan have to say? Because again, he was really the only other person there. So originally he told police that his father had only been out of his sight for about 2 minutes on the day that his mother died. But then he would later say he wasn't quite sure of the timeline. Yeah. So nobody really knows just how long Tristan and Todd were apart that day. And also how long it would actually take for this to happen. Remember I said Tristan left to go to the office to get some water. You know, we don't know how long that actually was and how long an attack like this would take.
It seems like if this was a planned attack, it's very odd. I mean, I guess the plan is to frame it as a farming accident, but a corn rake to the back with your son around, I don't know. It's a very strange accident to kind of set up. It's awful to me when the worst part of these cases is when people involve their children in the actual crime to try to establish some type of alibi or, it's just,
Well, yeah, because Tristan's the one who found his mother.
That's what I mean.
So if Todd, in fact, did this, he had his son discover that gruesome scene.
And it's not the first case before that, children have been used in this way. And it's just, it makes it so much worse. It really does.
Even though the police had their suspicions, they needed some evidence. So a search warrant was executed for all of Todd's electronics and also the property's camera system.
Oh.
There were working cameras in the area, but for some reason, they stopped working. They were working prior to that day.
I was going to say, they either didn't capture it or they didn't work right then. Right.
Now, Todd told police that his cats were known to knock over the cameras because they often hung out in that area. Okay, but besides the cameras, what did they find when they looked at his iPad?
Yeah.
Well, some digital evidence would point directly at Todd. His iPad would reveal that earlier in 2018, he searched Google for things like, quote, did ancient cultures kill adulterers? Thrill of the kill. Thrill of the hunt. Famous quote, no thrill like that of a hunting man. Once you hunt man, you will always feel the thirst. What happens to cheaters in history? Killing unfaithful women. What to do with large open chest wounds. And organs in the body.
I mean, doesn't look good.
No, and just to play devil's advocate, other family members did have access to this iPad, but I think it's a stretch to say that any of the children were performing these searches. Now, Todd
looking
did say
at what to do with cheating spouses and whatnot.
Now, Todd said some of the information he was searching about the hunting was relevant to some of his hobbies, but it's important to point out, though, there was no hard evidence that pointed to Todd. There was no DNA. However, there was clearly a mountain of circumstantial evidence.
I mean, even if there was DNA, he was her husband and he was around her, so it would have to be very specific.
Exactly.
It would have to be like, even if it was under her fingernails, they could explain that too, So, yeah.
Todd was arrested and charged with first-degree murder of his wife, and he was held on $5 million bond. And this was in February of 2019. Now, his attorney argued for his bond to be reduced to $1 million cash with the GPS monitoring requirement. His lawyer argued that Todd was being very cooperative during the investigation and that he had strong ties to the community through his family and through the farm. But prosecutors said, no way. This crime was heinous, violent, and he was facing a life in prison without the possibility of parole, thereby making him a flight risk. Do you want to guess what the judge decided?
Held him.
Yeah, the judge denied the defense's motion.
Yes.
In September of 2019, which is fairly quick, Todd Mullis' trial began. And Court TV covered the whole trial. That's why I was surprised that you hadn't heard about it.
I think I have, so
okay.
I'm saying, hold on, because I think I know something happens at trial, so I think I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Now, the trial had to be moved from his home county of Delaware since he had such close ties to the family and to the area because of his farm work.
All right.
Now, do you recall if Todd testified in his own defense? Or what do you
Yes.
think Todd did here? He testified in his own
Yes.
defense. That is correct. He really had to in this kind of case.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of attorneys do not want their clients to testify, but I don't think Todd had a choice here.
When they can't use any other witness to explain what happened, that's the reality.
Yeah. During cross-examination, Todd explained that the certain internet search terms about killing were related to a hunter safety training. And though he did admit that Amy's death was not an accident and someone had stabbed her in the back with the corn rake, he says it was not him.
Oh, okay. So they conceded. Oh, well, that's
Which is interesting because they could have, at first it was she hurt herself accidentally. But I think once it became clear that she had the puncture wounds that didn't line up with an accidental fall, I think they had to pivot a bit.
They had to, but it doesn't look good. There's really no one else to suggest, so.
No. Todd also claimed that he wasn't actually convinced that Amy was having an affair, which I don't know how he could say that given that he told family and friends that he was suspicious and he confronted Jerry himself.
Yeah, but he's trying to minimize motive.
Now, the prosecution would argue that Todd had wanted to kill his wife for years, but he waited until she had a medical procedure so that it would be more believable that she had taken a fall. Remember, she had that procedure and she was a little unsteady on her feet.
Yeah, no, I understand. And I understand it. It's just still such an odd way to murder
I think
her.
they're obviously trying to prove that it was premeditated because it's really difficult to say if this was first or second degree, but they're going for first degree here.
Okay.
During closing arguments, the prosecution said that Todd, quote, butchered his wife and addressed how their son Tristan Mullis's testimony changed from his original depositions about how long his dad was out of his sight on the day of the murder. The prosecutor urged jurors to consider the Google searches on the iPad, along with the evidence from the 911 call placed by Todd Mullis. The prosecution claimed that Mullis in the call is saying, quote, go to hell, you cheating whore. Which I didn't hear personally. I didn't go back and really listen, but the defense told the jury it's actually that Todd was out of breath and he was saying she's cold. I didn't hear him say, go to hell, you cheating whore, but
The problem for the defense here is that there is simply no one else to point the finger at if there's no one else there.
Unless Tristan, but I think
which
that's
would be a
ridiculous.
big stretch. So if this had happened at a time where Todd maybe they couldn't place him at the farm, or if he hadn't admitted to being in close proximity with her all morning, if there were other people on the farm at the time, it would be different. But there's simply no other explanation, really.
And the jury wants to hear an alternate narrative.
And there isn't one, so.
There isn't one. I don't think you'll be surprised to know that the jury convicted him of first-degree murder. And this was about 2 days of deliberation.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
The conviction carried a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Yes.
However, that's not the end of the story, as Todd filed for post-conviction relief in early 2024.
Ah, okay.
Now, for those of you who might not know, post-conviction relief is also known as PCR. This is simply a legal process that allows a defendant to challenge a criminal conviction after the trial. And it's usually the final chance to challenge a conviction on the state level.
They challenge it, though. Isn't post-conviction, it goes to the original court, doesn't it? To the trial court?
Well, yeah, I was going to say the most common form of post-conviction relief is the direct appeal.
Okay.
And basically, yeah, this involves challenging the conviction or the sentence through the appellate court system. So in these cases, appellate attorneys will review the trial record for errors of law or procedure and then argue the case before a panel of appellate judges. So remember, people are not appealing on the grounds of innocence. You're appealing on the grounds of a mistake at the trial level. And most studies indicate...
What mistake?
You'll hear.
Okay.
Most studies indicate that only a very small percentage of post-conviction petitions are successful. And Meghan, let's see, trivia time. Which is the most commonly appealed error that is the least likely to elicit an appeal?
Ineffective counsel, ineffective assistance of counsel.
Yes, exactly. So, that's the most difficult one to prove in court.
Yes.
Todd's attorneys say that he is insistent that Amy's death was an accident, and they are asking that his conviction and sentence be vacated and that he be given a new trial.
But that doesn't make sense because you said at trial they conceded that it could have been a murder. So now it's changing his tune to it was an accident? Okay.
Yeah, it's very confusing. So the trial was granted, surprisingly. Yeah, so on February 26th of 2025, not long ago, Todd had his first post-conviction relief hearing. Now, again, they didn't They didn't overturn the case, but they allowed a hearing.
Okay. Do you know on what grounds?
Yes. So Todd's new attorneys called his original trial fundamentally unfair and claimed that prosecutors withheld evidence and that his trial counsel was ineffective. Now, as we just said, you're not going to get very far on the ineffective assistance, but Brady violations are quite serious.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was the claim there. Okay.
Again, it's the claim. That doesn't mean that it's true.
Well, they got a hearing on it. Okay.
Yes. So court documents state, quote, from the moment he observed Amy Mullis unconscious on their family farm, Todd consistently told 911, first responders, law enforcement, and his trial counsel that Amy must have fallen onto the corn rake that caused her death. Nobody listened to him, including his trial counsel. But again, on the stand, he said he believed that somebody else murdered her. So accidental death was pretty much ruled out. So they're kind of, his legal team's going back and forth. Court filings also claim that there was a conflict of interest among witnesses. And this was because there was a failure to recuse Delaware County Attorney John Bernau, who allegedly was a very close friend of Amy's. Actually, him and his wife had visited the home several times. They attended events.
What is the evidence, though, or the information that the prosecutor withheld?
The only thing I'm able to gather from the information that I found, which will be in our show notes, is that this relationship between the prosecutor and the Mullis family.
I see.
And so because that was not disclosed, he was not recused. But maybe there was something else that wasn't publicly available.
That's pretty serious, though. That's pretty serious. Yeah.
Now, the hearing lasted about a week, and it included testimony from many witnesses and a lot of depositions from Todd's trial attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
During closing arguments, Todd's attorney, Tara Thompson, says that there is, quote, no doubt that the 2019 trial was unfair. And she noted the medical evidence that shows that this was an accident, which I don't know what evidence showed it was an accident. Also, that some of the electronic evidence from the iPad searches were not what they seemed. And the, quote, ambush 911 call, which was presented at trial. The state, of course, does not believe that the evidence warrants a new trial, which I don't think anything very strong here. Do you see anything strong? Unless there's something that I didn't find.
Only the conflict with the attorney. I don't. But this, we're doing a limited review, although you've done a much deeper dive than I have. I'm not seeing it other than the relationship withheld, which I do think is an issue.
Yeah. Now, according to court documents, both parties have an opportunity to submit their final written briefs by April 8th of this year.
Oh.
So a written ruling. Yeah. So this is still ongoing. A written ruling will be issued by the court sometime after April 8th. I don't imagine that this is going to be big news here. No. If it is, we will certainly do an update episode. I can promise you that.
Yeah, I don't see this going anywhere. But hey, I've been surprised in court decisions more than once. So
that's true. Okay, so this begs the question, is it possible that this man is innocent? Because believe it or not, many people think so. In fact, there's a whole website devoted to his innocence called freetoddmullis.com. There's also a Justice for Todd Mullis Facebook group that has almost 800 members. I'm not convinced at this point, and I always like to err on the side of caution, but the evidence seems pretty strong in this case. I just simply can't think of an alternate theory. What do you think?
I would give him the benefit of the doubt if the injuries didn't show that she was impaled repeatedly. Mm-hmm. Like if there were these puncture wounds and it happened once, then I could say, hey, she might have fallen on something. Like, you really can't say for sure. And there might have been other equipment around her. I don't know what else was around her as well. But I think when you're saying that she was impaled multiple times, I don't see how that points to an accident. And if I'm following a logic game here, a logic circle here, if it's not an accident, unless I'm missing information here about who was at the house that day, I don't see who else would be responsible. Likely not her child.
So I just want to respond to the accident theory a little bit, because his defense team says the way they explain it is that she fell and then she got up to try to save herself and then fell again. And that's how they're explaining it. So she got up to try to take it out of her back herself and then fell back on a second time. But
okay, that's important information.
But experts testify that would have been very unlikely given the placement, the size, the length of her arm, and how in shock she would have been from the initial injury.
So I was going to say that as well. Yeah, I think that seems more unlikely. I think it seems for me, I understand why a jury found him guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Not much of a question here for me.
Yeah. So if we're going to go with the fact that Todd is guilty, which we should because a jury found him guilty, what are some theories that can help us understand this case? This seems pretty straightforward as far as why he would do this. He had very clear motives here. Number one, financial. If they were to divorce, he would lose part of his farm. Mm-hmm. He was also probably hurt that his wife had an affair twice. So there was anger. So there was the emotion behind it.
Do they have a history of, to me, this seems like clear rational choice. This guy he planned it out. He did not want to lose, like you said, he didn't want to lose his fortune, his farm, probably his children. This seems like he really thought this out. He premeditated it. Rational choice says that you take a number of steps, right? There's planning at every stage. So there's a number of opportunities and choices that show a progression in making or selecting a crime. Target, opportunity, all of these things are at play. So to me, it seems like rational choice seems like a very odd way, again, how he chose to kill her. I think that was a strange thing. And I don't know, do they have a history of violence? I know she was afraid of him, but is there anything... Does he have a history, a criminal history of violence that we know?
From what I was able to find, there seems to be maybe a history of verbal threats. Yeah. I'm not sure that it ever turned physical. But also...
It could have been, and we don't know. I was just curious if there was anything documented.
Yeah. And going back to what you were saying, I couldn't see this being a second-degree murder case. I'm not sure that it was premeditated. I know that the prosecution said because of the surgery she had, he was capitalizing on the fact that she might be a little weak and unsteady.
Yes, the capitalizing on an accident, but that doesn't necessarily show premeditation. The Google searches probably do show premeditation.
That's true. Yep, so, that's a good point, actually. I forgot about the Google searches. It's also possible, though, that he was planning it, but didn't know when he was going to do it and then saw an opportunity in that exact moment. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, definitely. It's not the clearest premeditation case, but yes. I do still see it.
Yes. I do too. And yes, rational choice theory, strain theory. I don't know how many times we can talk about strain theory, but clearly he was experiencing many stressors, and that probably had something to do with everything kind of coming to a head at a point for him. Maybe a little control balance. He felt like he was losing control of the situation.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. It was just the way in which he seemed to think about what he had to lose. Yeah, that I see this as a utilitarian crime too, more so than cases where we've covered domestic violence cases where it seemed like this was definitely wasn't about money. It was about control, loss. And in this case, it seems more utilitarian to me about what physical things he had to lose.
And unfortunately, now you have 3 children that are left without parents. Yeah. One parent is dead and the other parent is in prison for life. So, at the end of the day,
one child's got the extra trauma of having been a witness to all of this and used in all of this, which is probably the worst part for me.
Yes. And as I said, if there is some sort of update other than the fact that his conviction is upheld, you will definitely hear an update from us. But I am curious what people think. Like I said, public sentiment, I was surprised to see so much support for Todd. So I would be interested in what our listeners and viewers think. So definitely let us know. Speaking of our listeners and viewers, before we go today, I just want to share a recent review that really made me smile.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So RSK5891 left us an awesome review saying, "Great podcast with professional evidence-backed input from real experts, not just entertainment, but learning opportunities." So I want to say a big thank you because that is exactly what we set out to do. It was said perfectly. And when somebody is getting what you're trying to give, that's exactly what we're trying to do. It just makes us so happy.
Yeah,
so
it does.
Thank you so much for that review.
Thank you.
And if you too are enjoying the show, please leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And of course, in addition to leaving a review, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us at womenandcrimepodcast.com/contact. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. And we look forward to catching you next time on Women and Crime.
Women in Crime is written and hosted by Meghan Sachs and Amy Shlosberg. Our producer is James Varga. Script editing is by Abagail Belcastro. Audio editing is by Siler Burr and Jose Alfonzo. And music is by Desert Media. If you enjoy the show, please remember to follow and leave a review. You can also support the show through Patreon, where you can get access to additional ad-free content such as exclusive full-length episodes, lectures, a book club, and virtual happy hours with Meghan and Amy. For more information, visit patreon.com/womenandcrime.
Sources for today's episode include CBS News, Oxygen, State vs. Mullis 2022, Court TV, People.com, and Iowacourts.gov.